and I'm the Green Business Network Program Manager at Bridging the Gap. With me today is Dr. Jay Antle with Johnson County Community College's Center for Sustainability. I'd like to thank Jay and JCCC for hosting today's webinar. This is our second webinar as part of this partnership to bring our programming online. Last month, hopefully you were able to join us. We had a great discussion about the state of recycling in our region. If you happen to have missed that one, don't worry, you can access a recording of it on the GBN website, and we'll post a link to that in the chat feature. Before we get started on today's topic, I want to quickly go over a few housekeeping details. First of all, attendees are in listen-only mode. We ask that you use the toolbar located at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat button if you're having technology issues. Dr. Christy Hell with JCCC is running behind the scenes for us, and she'll be able to help you if you're having any tech issues. We do ask that if you have a question for our presenters, you use the Q&A button. We'll stop periodically to answer questions and also allow time at the end if we can't get to them all during the presentation. And then finally, we are recording this webinar, so within a few days, we should have it up on the Green Business Network website to access, and we'll send a link out for that as well. Okay, so our topic today is all about the concept of biophilic design in the workplace and the many benefits of connecting employees with nature. And this is something that JCCC has been doing for many years. In fact, I was actually first introduced to this idea several years ago when we toured JCCC to learn about on-campus sustainability efforts. And I'm going to turn it over to Jay so he can share a little bit about the Center for Sustainability's work and the living wall that's there on campus. Jay?
All right, thank you, Leslie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. While this webinar is about biophilic response to green office design, well, of course, we do here at Johnson County Community College is we serve students. And so the building on campus where you will find us doing this work is a classroom building called Galileo's Pavilion. And you see an image of one of our 3 green walls in that building on your screen right now. Galileo's Pavilion actually has a long history going back to probably almost 4 or 5 years before it was actually even built. When students on campus talked about wanting to have a demonstration green building on campus. And ultimately that idea bubbled up in several different ways and culminated in Johnson County Community College having the Studio 804 program made up of architecture students at the master's level from the University of Kansas to come build this building for us, and it's ultimately was given LEED Platinum status. So this building has 2 classrooms and a lounge, and each one of them has a green wall in it. As you'll be hearing from Kasey a little bit later on, there are different types of green walls. The one that we have is one that has a variety of plants in it and requires fairly frequent watering and maintenance, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later on. But it creates a very different feel both in those classrooms and in the center lounge. We find students, whenever the building is open, hanging out in the lounge area, whether it be the way the green wall makes them feel or the way that the light reflects in from the southern glass exposure, so it's actually warm in there, even during the coldest of winter days. It really is a very comfortable feeling and comfortable smelling place. People were talking about how the air quality in all those rooms to them seems superior to other places on campus. Next, please. Again, here's another picture of one of the green walls in one of the classrooms. And next. All right, so here you see actually people in the space, and we use the space a great deal. On the left, you see the other classroom you haven't seen, and then you see a presentation being done in the lounge space, which is in the center of the building. So this building gets used a great deal for a variety of events, not just classroom activities. And one thing we wanted to ensure was that students from all areas on campus would be able to enjoy the building. So unlike at some places, there's no academic program that owns this building or owns a classroom. So students from a wide variety of classes, from all across campus, will be in this class, in these spaces, get to experience what it's like to be in a building with a green wall and ask questions about not just the green wall, but about the recycled content in the building, the way solar works, et cetera, et cetera. The idea is that this is a learning lab for students from all over campus to ask questions about the built environment. And in that way, this building has been more successful than we could ever possibly imagine. Next. So I think I saw a question in the chat window about maintenance, and Kasey will talk about this. Depending on the kind of wall you choose, you'll have different amounts of maintenance. So this particular wall is watered by rainwater captured off the roof and rerouted through a cistern. And of course, that comes with its own set of maintenance issues. But for us, the most challenging maintenance issues have actually been related to light and pH of the water. In the center lounge, because we don't have curtains on that in that space, the plants there get exposed to an awful lot of light. And then all the plants in all three spaces get sort of kind of wildly bouncing pH levels as you go back between city water and rainwater, depending on how much is actually rained. So what you see here is a photograph of Katie, who's been doing a lot of the work maintaining these walls since the building was put in. And so these walls can require, at least our walls, can require a fair amount of TLC because of the kind of hoops we make these poor plants jump through. So as part of the design process, there are certainly ways to make the maintenance of these walls considerably less weighty than we've been at Johnson County Community College. But we wanted this building to do lots of different things at the same time. And so as a result, that's made the green walls a bit more tricky to maintain. So we're always happy to give anybody a tour of Galileo's Pavilion or any of our things here on campus. Feel free to give Christy or I an email and we'll be happy to set something up. So with that, Leslie, turning it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Yes, I'm excited for when we can get back to doing our tours and maybe tour the campus again to see and hear about not only Galileo's Pavilion, but also all the other cool things that you guys are working on. Before I introduce Kasey and Sarah, I do want to talk a little bit about Green Business Network. If this is your first time attending a Green Business Network program, I encourage you to check us out at greenbusinessnetworkkc.org and consider maybe becoming a member. Our programs and tours give businesses the chance to connect with each other, learn best practices around sustainability, share your challenges and solutions, and hopefully we inspire you to take action. I do want to mention that Green Business Network is a program of Bridging the Gap. We are a local nonprofit focused on environmental education and action, and we have a lot of opportunities for both individuals and businesses to get involved in volunteer activities that better our environment. So things like planting trees, helping to restore our remnant prairies, and helping out at our drop-off recycling centers through Kansas City, Missouri. We have started to resume some of our volunteer opportunities, of course, making the necessary changes to ensure that they're safe and that they follow COVID-19 protocols. So if you are looking for ways to get out of the house and do some good while practicing physical distancing, check us out. I've also included Bridging the Gap's website here so that you can find that website. And I put my email up here in case you want to reach out to me after this webinar to get any more information. It's also important for us to recognize our corporate sponsors who support the Green Business Network all year long, and ultimately they make programs like this one possible. And last, before I introduce our main presenters, I want to invite you all to attend GBN's next event in partnership with the Kansas City Industrial Council. We'll have a panel of experts and business leaders talking about the importance of looking at how well your building operates from an energy efficiency perspective. And managing those changes that are happening right now in fluctuating occupancy levels, especially in light of COVID-19. You know, building owners and facility managers are really in a scramble right now to figure out how to make sure that buildings have the proper air ventilation and how they're healthy and safe places for people And paying attention to energy use really plays a key role in that. So if you have a building owner or a facilities manager, this would be a great one to share with them. Registration will be up on our website soon, and I'll be sure to send out a link to everyone after the webinar. We're also planning our next webinar with JCCC for August. It'll be a little bit different perspective on energy efficiency, this time focused specifically on those grassroots efforts that green teams can make to gain momentum around energy savings for their business. So stay tuned for that. All right, but I've sidetracked enough, and I want to bring us back to our topic for today that you're all here for, Office and Nature, the Benefits of Biophilic Design at Work. I am super excited to introduce our main presenters for this topic. First, we have Kasey Riley. She's co-owner of the Fat Plant Society, which is a local biophilic design studio focused on moss designs for interiors. We also have Sarah Crowder. Sarah is the program manager for Heartland Tree Alliance. It's another program housed here at Bridging the Gap that works to educate and create advocates for healthy trees throughout the city. So I'm excited for both of them to share their knowledge with you about the importance of connecting people with nature at work, both indoors and outdoors. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kasey, and let you share your screen to start us off.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I had the opportunity to receive a personal tour with Jay Antle. I want to say it was summer. I remember it was warm, and what a beautiful, beautiful campus it is. And I highly recommend that you take him up on his offer to do a tour if you have the chance, because it's well worth it. Let's go ahead and get started and jump right into the presentation that I have to share with you all today. We're going to talk about biophilic design, why it's good for you, why it's good for the earth, and how it'll help your well-being. We'll get started right away with a little bit of information about biophilic design on the whole. And I try to differentiate, when we do these talks, I try to differentiate right off the bat about the difference between biophilic design and biomimicry. Biophilic design was actually first used by the German psychologist Erich Fromm. He used it to describe an orientation of being attracted to something that is alive and vital. So if you can conceive of philias, biophilia, or being a biophiliac, philias are things to which we're very attracted, as opposed to, of course, phobias, which are the aversions to. But E.O. Wilson actually is often and most attributed to using the term and coining the term popularly. It's simply defined as a love of life or living systems. I talk about biophilic design as the notion of very simply bringing nature indoors. And that is to be contrasted with biomimicry. And biomimicry is a little bit different in that biomimicry is used most often by engineers. Biomimicry is utilizing nature as a model for design processes. And we're talking everything from water impellers that move water that might be modeled on a calla lily to utilizing spider silk in windows to prevent bird strikes from happening, because the birds can actually see the spider silk that the human eye cannot. So biomimicry is a little bit more sophisticated. It's utilizing nature as a model for engineering. Many people don't know that we actually have 30 senses. We think about, sight, smell, sound, touch, but we actually have 30 senses, and our 30 senses make us innately wired for nature. Some of you may have heard of the term forest bathing. I believe it was the Japanese who first really coined the term. And basically forest bathing means spending time in the forest. It's a wonderful thing to do for those of you that enjoy hiking as much as my husband and I do. You can appreciate that feeling that you get when you're in the middle of the forest and your body kind of relaxes and you can feel the soil beneath your feet, the smell of the forest itself. Many of us don't have the opportunity to take a forest bath every day, but we can still provide ourselves with indirect experiences with nature. So this is where biophilic design comes into play. What is biophilic design in the first place? Well, It is, again, bringing that nature inside. And there's a lot of research to support biophilic design. In fact, the World Green Building Council's outlook is focused on health, it's focused on recovery. And I'm sharing some data here with you that 60% at an Akron Children's Hospital, that 67% more satisfied with their experience in this space after it underwent a green sweep, meaning they were introducing greenery of any kind wherever possible. So biophilic design is introducing actual greenery. It's introducing things like living walls, such as you saw through Jay's presentation, moss walls. This is the Fat Plant Society design that you see on the left, and also using biomorphic forms and patterns. One of the exciting things that's happening in biophilic design right now is that architects and scientists are beginning to work more together. And architects and scientists, neuroscientists obviously speak very different languages, but they are going to great lengths to try really hard and connect with one another. In fact, there's now an Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture. And it turns out that a lot of our cognition and what we experience in the world is actually unconscious. So that's why it's essential for architects to know about these patterns and how they've evolved over time and how the brain actually recognizes them. So we here at the Fat Plant Society find it incredibly exciting that architects and neuroscientists are actually working together. Another aspect of biophilic design, in addition to bringing actual nature into a space, is utilizing biomorphic forms and patterns. We are innately attracted to and comforted by these patterns, and you see them. I'm sure this Fibonacci sequence that you see here is familiar to you. For those of you that are plant lovers, you'll notice that a lot of your plants and vines actually feature that exact shape as they start to unfurl. We see this pattern repeated again and again and again, and I could go on and on about the importance of the Fibonacci sequence, but what we're seeing in biophilic design is that everyone from carpet manufacturers to wallpaper designers are implementing biomorphic forms and patterns in what they do. And designers are also utilizing tree trunks and wood elements and trying to increase the amount of light that a given space may have in order to make people feel better and ultimately more productive. We do have a natural desire to be connected with nature. So, and in sharing some of the statistics to back that up, simply staring at an image of natural scenery for 40 seconds is enough to trigger the brain into a more relaxed state. The wall that you see there was a recent installation that is at the John A. Marshall Company showroom in Lenexa, Kansas. And as part of their showroom redesign, they wanted to incorporate some greenery. This greenery aids in restoring attention. In biophilic design, we talk a lot about the concepts of attention restoration. And attention and restoration theory was actually coined by Kaplan and Kaplan way back in the 80s. But what it means is that the world is very tiring. Looking at screens and paying attention, we experience a great deal of mental fatigue. Nature reduces that stress by providing refuge and a means to restore your attention in artificial settings and settings that aren't nature. So it also increases our feelings of well-being by over 40%. I'm going to pause here for a moment to tell you a story that I heard yesterday, and it really had an impact on me. I had the luxury of, I was listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast interview with David O'Koyman. David O'Koyman is the founder of NookPod. If you're familiar at all with NookPod, they're the little pods you see, they're self-contained. David shared some really interesting information about a study that took place in the 1970s. The study asked folks who worked in cubicles, the office cubicle that you're familiar with, unadorned, without greenery. They were given a series of tests in the cubicles as is, and then they were given the same test again with plants in the space. Not surprisingly, their performance on the test increased significantly with plants in the space. There's a third test that took place. And that enabled the participants to not only have plants in the space, but to personally designate where those plants go. And once again, we saw their performance on those tests increase. So all the way back in the 70s, we were aware that nature in a space really has a significant bearing on productivity and performance. And it's wonderful to see the changes taking place now that it's really, really being adopted. And of course, the pandemic, I think is causing us all to look differently at our spaces and how we can make both home and the office a better and healthier environment for everyone. Biophilic design is good for you. Talk a little bit about moss for a moment. Moss, for example, cleans the air of volatile organic compounds. It's going to dampen noise frequencies, provides really lovely acoustic balance. That's another thing that David O'Coyman mentions quite a bit. Part of the impetus for starting the pod was acoustics. And I highly encourage you to find that podcast on the Journal of Biophilic Design, because it's a good one. The moss that we use at the Fat Plant Society is actually, it is dormant. We like to say our moss is neither living nor dead. It's merely been preserved using a natural paraffin process. It's also rendered a rich green color using a natural vegetal dye. And that enables the moss to retain its color for up to 10 years. It does not need a dirt substrate. It does not require any watering, and it does not require any misting. I'll talk a little bit more about the difference between moss walls and living walls, as Jay alluded, in just a moment. But what we look at when we examine biophilic design often is it's very easy to think of it using 3 different pillars: nature in the space, nature analogs, meaning visual imagery that might call nature to mind, and the nature of the space, meaning that you're providing spaces for refuge as well as providing air ventilation, windows, wonderful views. The more light and natural light folks have in a given space, the happier they tend to be. And again, referencing this notion of attention restoration theory, we do pay a price for our mental fatigue. And in contrast, nature gives us what we call fascination. So looking up at whether it's a rock pattern or a wood pattern or a moss pattern, we're able to be fascinated on a subconscious level, and that then enables us to refocus once again. I love this quote by Rachel Carson because it just resonates, and I feel it's so accurate. There is just something so incredibly and infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature. I kept this quote in the presentation because the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring comes after winter felt awfully appropriate as we look for assurances that we will find an end to this pandemic, and in the meantime, we will spend as much time in nature as possible. Biophilic design concepts don't need to be relegated to homes and offices. Architects and designers are using them in hospitals, senior living centers, hotels, spas, and schools. I have tried to curate as much and create a great deal of original content that addresses these industries specifically. So as you visit thefatplantsociety.com, you might check out our blog page because I do focus on each of these industries specifically. There's also a post titled "The Midwest is More Sustainable Than You Think," which features information about my great tour with Jay Antle on the JCCC campus. And as I mentioned, let's talk a little bit about green walls on a whole, just to break it down simply. We all use the term green walls. Green walls refer to walls that are green, and that would obviously encompass both living plant walls and moss walls, both. There is a significant difference, and I think that difference lies in the difference of life. As I mentioned earlier, the moss that we use at the Fat Plant Society is dormant, meaning it is neither living nor dead. It's rendered dormant. That has some wonderful maintenance benefits, but again, it is not a living plant wall, as Jay shared with us earlier, and you can see the difference between them. So To address that, I have a post that I update every year for our website. You can also find it on medium.com. The post is titled Moss Walls versus Living Walls, which is best for your needs and desires. And I chose that title very carefully because at the Fat Plant Society, we love all things green. We adore living walls, we adore plants of all kinds, and the post is really an attempt to break down the differences as clearly and with as much fact and information as possible. So again, that's moss walls versus living walls, which one is best for your needs and desires. That can be found on the Fat Plant Society website and on Medium. The photo you see here is actually the BRR architecture lobby on Metcalf Avenue in Overland Park. And that is pillow moss that you see there. Pillow moss differs from reindeer moss, as you were able to see in the previous slide at John A. Marshall Company. When I advise folks, and when my husband and I provide advice on biophilic design, the thing that we advise first is to try to implement a multi-sensory approach. Maybe select one area that you're going to designate as an area of refuge, and then implement that biophilic design in that area in as many ways as possible. You might use moss design to designate a corner, and then ensure that the views and the light and the air and the acoustics are likewise complementary. As I mentioned, maintenance-free moss cleans the air of VOCs, and it's just one way, just one of many, many ways to incorporate biophilic design. I'm going to turn to questions in just a moment, but one of the things I'll leave you with is a set of 3 questions with regard to biophilic design. And the first question is it sustainable? The second, is it natural? And the third, is it textural? Those are 3 wonderful sort of guiding questions to ask yourself when you're looking to implement biophilic design. I'm going to turn now to some questions.
Kasey, I'm looking here. Attendees, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Kasey, please put them in the Q&A section and we can read those. I have a question for you, Kasey. You mentioned, sure. You know, for someone that's just getting started and wanting to implement some biophilic design into their office space, and if they maybe don't have like a designated budget for it or something like that, what are some simple ways, cost-effective ways that they can start implementing some of these ideas?
This is going to sound really strange and incredibly obvious. Cleaning the windows. During the initial shutdown with the pandemic, there's a wonderful biophilic designer in the UK by the name of Oliver Heath, and I would highly recommend visiting his website as well, because he's got a wealth of information. But it was Oliver Heath who was cleaning his windows, and he shared that to Instagram, and I did the same. And you forget how much your windows, you know, the dirt and the pollen and everything else that goes along. So in terms of a completely free, you know, labor only tactic for improving your view and adding more natural light to your space, clean the windows. That's number 1. There are, of course, other, we do moss installations as small as 2 feet by 2 feet and as large as 30 feet by 5 feet. And everything in between. So implementing nature in this space, whether it's a living plant wall or basic house plants. I know that nurseries are seeing an incredible increase in traffic during the pandemic, and millennials in particular are spending, I want to say, they have massively impacted the plants and nursery industry because of their biophiliacs. They are really, really into plants and house plants and implementing plants in your home. A lot of folks like to start with succulents because they take less water. They're arguably a little bit more sustainable. You don't have to water them as often. In fact, most people end up killing their succulents by overwatering them. So keep that in mind. But yeah, clean the windows, introduce some house plants, and maybe plan for a moss design if it appeals to you.
Those are great suggestions. Thank you. We did have a question come in. How does one dust a moss wall, or is that needed?
That's a great question, and luckily it's not needed very often. The one you see, the rectangle is actually headed to a client soon, but the circular frames that you see behind me, they've been on these walls for quite some time, and I don't want to get into what kind of housekeeper I am, but I'm not fastidious, and I've never needed to dust them. But should the moss become dusty? Let's say there was some additional construction that went in after the moss was installed. We recommend that the moss be cleaned using compressed air, and the compressed air that you can find to use your computer keyboard, use that exact same kind of compressed air, just run it over the moss, and that will freshen it up. The moss, we do offer that as clients sometimes ask us about a maintenance contract for our designs, and I smile and say, I'd love to be able to charge you for coming out and dusting them, but that's just not within our ethics. You can simply buy some compressed air and dust the wall yourself. It takes seconds.
Awesome, thanks. That's really interesting. What about for living walls? Is there a specific amount of, Jay talked a little bit about the maintenance that was required, but what about like any kind of special lighting?
With regard to moss walls, moss walls actually don't love a great deal of direct sunlight. So just as a Kellum rug or an Oriental rug would fade if it were placed in an area that gets a lot of direct sunlight during the day, a moss wall or moss frame will fade if it's exposed to long hours of direct sunlight. It can handle some indirect sunlight, and obviously I have windows in my home, and the frames that you see around me, they absolutely get light, but we don't place them in, and we strongly advise our clients not to place the moss in areas that get extensive direct sunlight for long hours, long periods of time. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other questions in here, so I don't know if we want to go ahead and transition over to Sarah, or if there was anything else you wanted to say, Kasey.
No, I'm very excited to hear Sarah's portion of the presentation. So just to sort of underscore that notion of forest bathing, I'm fortunate enough that I live near a couple of parks. I'm in West Plaza in Kansas City, and I spend quite a bit of time in Roanoke Park. And I know they're in the midst of doing a lot of tree planting right now, and I could not be more excited because it's trees that really truly make all of our neighborhoods feel so good and so wonderful to be in. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time I want to introduce Sarah Crowder. As I mentioned before, she is our program manager for Heartland Tree Alliance. And Sarah, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for having me this afternoon. Kasey touched on a lot of really important pieces about seeing nature out your window, and I just wanted to touch on a little bit more that were very tree specific. But I wanted to just show you, this is a picture of smiling volunteers back when we could gather in large groups. As Leslie said, we are a program of Bridging the Gap. I'm a forester and an urban forester and arborist by trade. And we plant trees throughout the entire metropolitan in about the 6 counties. We plant anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 trees a year, and all of our work takes place because of really dedicated volunteers. We do other types of work days as well, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a minute. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about trees and your health, just for a few slides here. So why do we think trees are the answer for everything? Let me just give you a few points about benefits. Some of these may be those that you already knew, but maybe I can surprise you with a few as well. But trees improve your health. We talked a bit, she talked a bit about stress, and I'll also mention more of that. But health, trees in our urban area are even more important. In particular, they help filter air quality. I was just talking with somebody, if anybody's read about this dust, Sahara dust that we've got in the air. Trees can help filter that air before it reaches our lungs. It can help those and lower asthma. It can help those with asthma. It can decrease pulmonary issues. Trees have that filtering ability. They also can filter the water before it reaches our groundwater. They can help remove a lot of those pollutants. Outdoor activity, spending time outdoors, which I don't know about y'all, but I've noticed more people in my neighborhood walking. I've seen people say, you know, we're going to have the healthiest, buffest dogs after all of this, because I think people are just looking for a place to get outside. But that outdoor activity can actually reduce symptoms of Alzheimer's, dementia, depression. So spending time outside is really good for your mental health. And our mission here, Leslie touched on it a little bit, but we also want to bring healthier communities together by planting trees. And that's where that comes into play a bit. So safety, here's one that could surprise you, but trees planted along the street actually slows traffic down. So trees are often used as traffic calming devices besides speed bumps or traffic circles or whatever those might be. So trees in a neighborhood actually can slow traffic down. Neighborhoods that have trees and have heavy canopy actually have less violent crimes, and they have less minor crimes like vandalism and littering. And a lot of that has to do with, it encourages giving people a place to walk and spend time outside that's enjoyable, not this heated, hot space. It encourages more people to spend time outside. It encourages you to be out in your front yard, and so it encourages that more eyes on the street sort of mentality. Economy. So trees can really help the economy personally. Mature trees on your property can increase your property value up to 15%. It's a curb appeal thing. People really like to purchase properties that have these mature trees, and it can increase it that way. If you are a business owner and you're in a shopping district, trees along your street and trees in your area encourage shoppers to stay longer. And I talk to kids a lot, and I say, think about the malls. A lot of them don't even know what a mall is anymore. You think about how they're designing shopping districts now, like Zona Rosa and the Legends. It's outdoor shopping filled with trees and landscape and benches, and it encourages you to come. And yeah, you were just going to run in and grab one thing, but yeah, maybe you'll just go ahead and stay half the day before you know it. So trees can really help there. For those of you that might be business building owners, they've shown that you can get about a 7% increase in your rent if your rental property, your business property has trees implemented into the design somehow. And then back to kind of the personal, trees planted properly around your property, whether it's a business or a home, it can save you money on your energy. Trees that shade your home in the summer, trees that block you from winter winds, all of those can help in your energy costs. Community, neighborhoods that have green spaces, it encourages people to come together and spend time together, and it encourages people to invest and protect their neighborhood. So providing these type of community spaces, or even if you're in an apartment complex, having these common spaces where people can come together and spend time outside, it helps to sort of solidify that community type feeling. And then environment, I leave it for last because I think a lot of people, and I have a feeling I could be speaking to the choir for some people today too, but we know that trees provide oxygen, and we know that they store carbon dioxide. I mentioned the water filtration, but they also help slow stormwater in these times when we get these droughts and then we have gully washing rains. Trees can really help slow that water before it reaches our stormwater system. And besides filtering, it can really help slow it down and decrease the amount that hits that. Heat island effect is another key word that you may hear pretty often, and that it's pretty easy to see if you watch the local weather in the morning. You know, it's 10 degrees hotter in Kansas City as it is out in Olathe or Lee Summit. And that is just because of the green space, and trees can really help decrease that heat island effect by cooling. Not only do they shade by cooling with their leaves, but their leaves actually let off a little bit of moisture, which also cools the air, similar to what Kasey was mentioning about the moss and other green walls. And one thing I just, as a little takeaway, you can put this in your pocket of trivia, but one large mature tree can provide enough oxygen for 4 people in a year. So let's talk a little bit about how that could affect you at your business. We talked a lot, she's already talked a lot about trees inside, and they can also have similar effects by just being able to view them out a window. So being able to provide, the World Health Organization says that stress and low physical activity are the 2 leading contributors to premature death in developing countries. So that's stress and low physical activity. And as Kasey mentioned, we're task-oriented, we're sitting at our cubes and we're staring at screens all day. This type of view, even if you're just viewing it out your window, can be significantly, research shows, it can significantly lower your stress. It can boost productivity in your staff. It can improve job satisfaction. And it makes your staff more attentive, just to be able to view something outside of their window, whether it's trees or there's research actually shows it's better to have trees and shrubbery, but even green grass, something like that, where they can escape. But I know it's not always as easy to have space outside, but I wanted to try to give you some ideas as well. And I don't know what our office situation is going to look like after this, but I know that a lot of people are getting used to spending time outside. And if you can't provide space outside, you know, look at this lovely walkway with trees and moving water, and the sound of water also has a lot of restorative elements to it. But benefits there are huge after spending just 30 minutes outside in a space. She mentioned forest bathing. Absolutely. If you have that type of space, that is fantastic. But I also wanted to try to think outside the box of, you know, what if you're in a downtown setting or something like that where you don't have this, even providing a picnic table outside where people can go spend their lunch break or even a break, as a supervisor and leadership, encouraging and promoting people to leave their desk and move outside just for a few minutes. I know in our organization, we're all, you know, we love to be outside, and we oftentimes several times a week try to get together and just go on a walk. And we are not in the greenest of places, we're in the West Bottoms, but just going on a walk and being outside and unplugging can be really huge. And I would encourage you, depending on where your offices are located, look at local parks. There's oftentimes small little pocket parks. You could even send out emails and let people know, hey, did you know it's a quarter mile to this park? You can walk a loop and come back. It's a half-mile walk. And it's, you know, it's a really great activity. So I would encourage as leadership, if you're not able to provide such a huge space like this, think about the smaller things that you can do to encourage people to get outside and to unplug just for a few minutes. And if anything, I think, you know, my husband's working from home now constantly. And that's one thing he's having some issues with, is the work-life balance. Is he's now home all the time. So it's really easy for him to just go start working at any point. And so I think it's really important that we try to sort of segment ourselves and spend that time outside. So in case you were wondering, we would love to have you come and work with us. We do lots of corporate work days. This is actually the chief's administrative team that comes out and helps us annually. We are taking COVID restrictions. We are keeping our groups small. We're thinking about what our fall is going to look like. We used to host large work days. It'll probably look a little bit different, but similar to seeing nature outside, being in nature, and actually volunteerism can be really restorative and stress reducing and help with your mental health. And volunteerism outside, of course, is just like a double bonus. But we offer a lot of opportunities for citizens if you want to just come out by yourself, if you want to bring your family, or obviously groups. We do tree planting, as I mentioned. We also do mulching, where we help mulch around the trees. That helps protect them from park mowers and other things, helps hold water and moisture and cool the soil when we're hot. So those are important things. And then we also do this type of information where we do educational outreach and awareness. Like, I'd love to come and do a lunch and learn or do a Zoom if you wanted to talk more about trees along those lines. So that's really all I had. This is a group of super excited volunteers that spelled tree out for me as a YMCA type montage. This is my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me. Our website is a great resource. We have a lot of resources in this area, but another is the Climate Action KC has put together a playbook. And that can be found on Mid-America Regional Council's website, or you can just sort of Google and you'll find that information. But there are several pages that are dedicated just towards native plants and to trees, tree protection, planting trees, and includes information about and the benefits of those. So that's all I had for you. If you have any questions, or Leslie, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't see any questions right now. So again, if you do have, oh, I have one that just popped in. Let's see, Charles asks, there's conflicting information on whether certain plants can improve indoor air quality, potentially reduce volatile organic compounds. How are indoor plants effective at improving air quality, indoor air quality? And if so, are there particular species that you would recommend? This can be a question for either you, Sarah, or Kasey, or Jay even.
I'm hoping Kasey or Jay might know about that one. I don't even personally do house plants. For some reason, my green thumb does not extend indoors. So I'll leave that to somebody else.
I'll chime in. There's actually quite a bit of research. NASA has done quite a bit of research on indoor plants. I linked to quite a few of those different resources through various articles on the Fat Plant Society blog. One of the reasons with regard to absorbing VOCs, one of the reasons that moss specifically is so effective at absorbing VOCs is because it's so porous. And one of the things that we most enjoy when we get to meet with clients is we always bring a sample of the moss and they can touch it and feel it. And it's in feeling that, and you can even see in the background of the screen we have live for you here, it's that porous nature of the moss that enables it to eat up the volatile organic compounds. Things like plastic that put off VOCs, formaldehyde, other things. The moss just absorbs it, but obviously doesn't put it out. It also has a tendency to absorb odors. I noticed that if I cook in this house, cooking something that has a strong smell like bacon or fried chicken or fish, the moss absorbs odors really quickly but doesn't retain them. So the moss keeps its smell of the forest but absorbs odors, and it's just porous, and there's so much information and research on moss and lichens as a species, but I would really refer you to NASA's research on living plants and which living plants are the most effective.
Awesome, thank you, Kasey. Okay, so this is your last chance to put in any questions that you have for any of our panelists today. And while I'm giving people the last chance to do that, Sarah, I didn't know if you wanted to do a shameless plug for Tree Keepers and let people know a little bit about what that program is that you offer.
Sure. Yeah, we do adult education as well. We go into the classrooms, or used to go into the classrooms, K through 8, but we also offer adult education. We have what's called Tree Keepers. We actually just hosted our first Zoom Tree Keepers. We've never done that before, and it was pretty successful. We do a lot of hands-on typically in the course, so that was a little bit challenging to do, but we offer it twice a year. We do hope to offer it this fall. It'll be in September. I have not decided if we're going to offer it in a small group setting or if it's going to be Zoom setting again, but you can keep your eye out for that. And Tree Keeper is just a way to dive deeper into all things trees, from tree planting to pruning to ID to soils. And we also have had a lot of interest in fruit trees, and we don't particularly plant fruit trees, but we know there's a lot of interest in that, and we know there's a lot of questions about how to successfully do that. So we've also created, in partnership with the Giving Grove, which is another nonprofit in this area, a workshop called Orchard Keepers, and it's offered in the month of February. And as I mentioned, it's a partnership, so we teach a lot of similar information about soils and biology, and then Giving Grove comes in and talks about the pruning and some of the other specifics. So we have those adult education courses as well. Thanks, Leslie.
Sure. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to thank both Kasey and Sarah and also Jay for sharing about the work that you guys are doing related to connecting people with nature. And yeah, if there are no other questions, then I want to thank everybody for attending, and I will be sending out a email shortly with a survey. If you would take a minute to answer that, that would be really helpful to us in planning future webinars. Thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, everybody.